Okay, so the next part of the El Camino project that we're gonna do here, or I'm gonna do here, is I'm gonna do the brake lines front to rear. And to do that, first thing I'm gonna do is pull the engine out and the rest of the body work off the front. It's all just kind of sitting there. When I, when I bought this car, I bought it from a guy down in California, and the engine was sitting on a stand, and I asked him if he would put the engine, set it in there, so when I brought it back on the trailer, I'd have good weight distribution, you know, when I hauled it back, and also so I didn't have the engine tumbling around the back of my pickup. So it's just sitting in there. It doesn't have any of the torque converter or any of that stuff in there anyway. So I'm gonna pull it out. The engine will go up on a stand for right now. I'm probably gonna swap the cam in it and the intake while it's out, get that stuff done. But getting that out and getting the body work out of the front is gonna make putting in the new brake lines way easier. Also, I have a new brake kit on its way here that I ordered from Speedway, that a disc brake kit. This has disc brakes on it now, but it's a 67 to 68 disc brakes, which are a 4-piston caliper, and the parts are hard to get, and then they're expensive. So I'm just gonna swap it over to the later model, 69, I believe, to 74. It's a single piston, and parts are cheap and readily available. You can get them anywhere. So I'm gonna swap over to that, and then the old stuff I pull off, the 4-piston, it'll go in a box and go into storage, and it'll be saved for the car. So first step, get all this stuff here pulled apart, and I'll get started. So I changed the master cylinder a little while back, and I went to bleed the brakes, and that's when I realized I was having some other issues. The lines are leaking back down in here, and I cleaned them up real good and put them back in, and they're leaking. So it prompted me to think, well, I should probably go ahead and change the lines. And that's when I realized I was having some issues with front calipers too, the 4-piston calipers, and they needed to be rebuilt, and like I said, the parts are kind of expensive, so we're going to swap those out too. These lines are all going to get changed, and then around here, down to the proportioning valve on the side right here, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to pull the engine out. Also it needed to come out, but I'm going to change these lines coming into here. I already pulled the one that goes out to the back out of there. Another thing is, it looks like at some point the line had been repaired right through here with the compression fitting, which I'm pretty sure isn't going to be the right way to do this. So that whole line is going to be changed as well. And if you come over here, you can see I already have the rear line out and on the ground here, so that way I can go ahead and make up another one off of there. All right, so I figured I'd go over some of the stuff that I'm gonna use here. What I'm going to use is a copper nickel alloy brake line. Got this from Summit Racing. I bought a couple rolls of it, a 1/4 inch and a 3/16 roll. I've used this before on my 66 Chevy. I redid all the brake lines on that one when I built it. And boy, this stuff is great. You know, I've always kind of struggled with the steel lines, and from what I understand, stainless steel is even harder to work with than the steel lines. You know, and you get it, and you get your little bender in there, and you're getting it going, and next thing you know, it kinks, or it almost kinks, you know, or it kinks just enough that you think it's okay, but really it's not, you know, and you try to go with it anyways. But you know, the steel is just a real, it's tough to work with. And I know it can be done. I mean, it's in cars all over the place. But this stuff here is great, you know, super easy to work with. I use a tubing bender on it, but you don't really need to use it a lot, because you can just bend it around, kind of like a copper line. You know, that's the quality of the copper part of it. And it's corrosion resistant. It's corrosion resistant, and it's soft, so when you go to do your flares on it, they take really nicely, and also they seal up really well too, which is it makes it so much easier. So I'm a huge fan of this stuff. So another thing, excuse me, another thing that I did was I just went ahead after, you know, you got the little clamp ones with the screw on it. I got a couple of those, you know, for flaring the ends. I got a couple of those in my toolbox that'll probably stay there forever now, because I looked around and I found this Eastwood one, and it was a couple $100. It was a little bit on the pricey side, and I thought, oh man, you know, but I tell you what, it's worth every penny of it. It's super easy to work with. You don't over clamp it. A lot of times when those it's almost like a guillotine, those little ones. You close it down on it, and the line will slide in it, you know. It's hard to keep it right where it goes. This thing here, man, it comes with all these different dies and everything for your different size. It clamps it over a longer distance. It'll clamp the line nice and evenly, so when you pull out the line, it isn't all marred up or anything like that. And this is actually the 3/16 that we're going to use. And man, this stuff is great. You know, it was definitely worth the money. It hurt at first to buy it, but it was definitely, whoops, definitely worth it. So I'll put that back over here. A couple of other things I got was, I got one of their little bender things, because I had some real tight bends to do, and this is kind of a neat thing, but whatever. And you got to make sure when you're doing these lines that you have a sharp tubing cutter with no nicks or anything like that in there. It's super important that all this stuff is done really, really clean. And so what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and cut a section of this off right now. This is just an example line. I'm not going to use this one right now. I'm just going to show how this thing works, because I think it's just the coolest thing. So get that, you know, and you know, just cutting your line and sticking it in a flaring jig or whatever you're using isn't the way to do it. You gotta, first thing you gotta do is prep it. You know, you gotta make sure that it's hard for me to do stuff and talk at the same time. So you gotta make sure that your end is nice and cleanly cut. See, I don't know, you probably can't really see that very well, but it's got a really nice, clean cut on it. I got a lot of light coming into my shop right now, so it's kind of, everything turns white when I get close to the camera. So yeah, see, this thing has got this, again, a little deburring, because that's really critical if you want a good end on it. You want to deburr the end. See, again, that kind of cleans up the inside of it a little bit. And then the outside actually looks pretty good, but I'll take this other end on it and go around it real lightly. This stuff doesn't take much. And that cleans up the end. Let me grab some sandpaper real quick. All right, I'll just use some steel wool on it. You want to clean up the end of it so that way you have a nice, clean surface without anything on it, because like I said, this is the end that's going to go in and make your seal, and if it's not cleaned up, if it's got anything on there, that's going to affect it. So I made the cut, sanded it back a little bit, and then I prepped the edge. So next step, of course, this is a 1/4 inch one, but of course, first thing you want to do is get your piece on there. This isn't the right one, but it doesn't matter because I'm not actually making a line, I'm just making a flare. But you get your piece on there, because nothing worse than getting the right piece flared and everything and then realizing you forgot the end, because I've done that a bunch of times, because that's how I do things. So, and on here you have two different type of ends. There's a 45 degree and then there's a din. So 45 degrees is what we want. So that'll go out there like that. 3/16 line. It says operation 1, 2, and 3. Operation 1. Well, first we do operation 0. Let me put this thing here in there. We'll go to stick this in the line. Oh, I put that in there wrong. It's gotta go down like that. I drop stuff all the time. Okay, now we got the line in. Doesn't matter if it's lined up or not, really, but a little bit snug. You have operation 0, which this is pretty cool because this actually lines everything up. We'll get that out there. Okay. Operation 0 squares everything up, then you tighten it down, click it over to operation 1, OP1. Go, that'll put your first bit of flare in there. And then operation 2, 3/16. And there you have it. A perfect flare every single time, and they don't leak. One of the problems with using the other style is you end up over tightening them, and they should have a little bit of give to them in the flare, so that way when you tighten it up, it'll kind of mate together. But if you have it all already cranked down all the way and you go in there, there's no room for it to go anywhere to seal up. So anyways, that's my little lesson there on this thing, and I'll go ahead and measure out and get this other one cut and made up, and we'll go from there. All right, well, I got the lines all done. You can see all of these have been replaced. I'll slowly come over here, and you can see at the proportioning valve all the new lines that I've put in. So everything is in its place and hooked up. So next step is to do the front brake swap over.